In the final moments of the RMS Titanic, as the ship moved closer to its end in the cold waters of the Atlantic Ocean, the silence of the night was slowly replaced by a series of sounds that together created an atmosphere of tension, confusion, and overwhelming reality. Please subscribe. Sounds that would later be remembered by survivors as some of the most haunting elements of the entire experience. Sounds that carried with them the weight of what was happening and the emotions of those who were there. At the beginning, the night had been unusually quiet. The ocean was calm, the air was still, and there was a sense of peace that surrounded the ship. This quietness made the first unusual sounds more noticeable, as even small changes in the environment could be heard clearly. When the ship first made contact with the iceberg, the sound was not a loud explosion or a sudden crash as some might imagine, but rather a softer, more subtle noise, described by some as a scraping or tearing sound, as if something was being slowly pulled along the side of the ship. As time passed and the situation became more serious, the sounds began to change. Deep within the structure of the ship, there were noises that reflected the stress being placed on the metal. These sounds were not constant, but came in waves. Groans and creaks that suggested that the ship was struggling to maintain its structure. For those who heard them, these sounds were unsettling, as they indicated that something was wrong even if they could not fully understand what was happening. At the same time, the sound of water became more noticeable. As it entered the lower parts of the ship, it created a rushing noise that grew louder over time. This was not just the sound of water moving, it was the sound of space being filled, of areas that were meant to remain dry being overtaken. For those in lower sections, this sound was immediate and alarming, signaling that the situation was becoming more dangerous. Above deck, the human element added another layer to the soundscape. Voices began to rise, at first calm and controlled, then gradually becoming more urgent as the reality of the situation became clearer. Orders were given by crew members, instructions that needed to be followed quickly and accurately. These voices carried across the decks, sometimes clear, sometimes lost in the growing noise, but always present as part of the unfolding events. As more people became aware of what was happening, the sounds of movement increased. Footsteps, conversations, and the shifting of objects all contributed to a sense of activity that replaced the earlier calm. This was not chaos at first, but rather a transition from normalcy to urgency, a change that could be heard as much as it could be seen. One of the most striking aspects of these final moments was the contrast between different types of sound. There were moments where noise dominated, where multiple sounds came together to create a sense of intensity. And there were also moments where silence returned briefly, creating a pause that made the situation feel even more uncertain. These shifts between sound and silence added to the emotional impact of the experience. As the ship's condition worsened, the sounds became more dramatic. The structure itself began to produce louder noises, reflecting the increasing strain. These were not simple sounds, but complex ones, combinations of pressure, movement, and material under stress. For those who heard them, they served as a clear indication that the situation was reaching a critical point. The human voices also changed during this time. What had once been calm instructions became more urgent, and in some cases, more emotional. There were calls, responses, and attempts to communicate in a situation that was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. These voices, mixed with the mechanical and environmental sounds, created a layered experience that was both physical and emotional. In the final stages, as the Titanic approached its end, the sounds reached a peak. The combination of structural noise, water movement, and human voices created an overwhelming environment, one where it was difficult to focus on any single element. It was a moment where everything came together, where the reality of the situation was fully present in both sound and experience. And then, as quickly as it had built, the noise began to fade. As the ship disappeared beneath the surface, many of the sounds that had filled the air were replaced by a different kind of silence, a silence that was deeper and more complete than before. This silence was not peaceful, but rather a reflection of what had just occurred, a moment where the absence of sound carried its own meaning. Looking back, the sounds heard during Titanic's last moments provide a unique perspective on the event. They offer insight into what it felt like to be there, to experience the transition from calm to crisis through the sense of hearing. While visual images can capture what was seen, these sounds capture what was felt, adding another layer to the understanding of the tragedy. More than a century later, these descriptions continue to be part of the Titanic's story, helping to preserve the human experience of that night. They remind us that history is not just about events, but about the ways in which those events were experienced by individuals. In the end, the sounds of Titanic's final moments are a powerful reminder of the reality of what happened, a reminder that behind every historical event are sensory experiences that shape how it is remembered. They echo through time, not as noise, but as a connection to a moment that changed history forever.